After years of hard work, we can confidently call Keystone Park an overwhelming success. What was once just a barren field truly has turned into a small beacon of wildlife conservation and education. The work we've done and the connections that we've made are truly priceless, and the best part is, we've only just now gotten started. Keystone Park is finally large and profitable enough to focus our attention elsewhere, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're leaving for good. Keystone Park will remain open to the public and is being left in very trusted hands. All focus and assets now are being redirected to our latest project, Keystone Wilds. Both Keystone Park and Keystone Wilds share more than just the brand name, they share missions and goals too. Keystone Wilds will remain heavily focused on education, environmental awareness, animal care, and conservation. However, we do have a few new tricks up our sleeve that will be revealed in time. The main difference between the two locations is that where Keystone Park had to start off very small and eventually build up to be a beacon of wildlife care, Keystone Wilds can ride the former zoo's success and has big plans right off the bat. The two zoos are also geographically close, meaning that animals can cross over at any time. For example, if an animal at Keystone Wilds needs treatment that only one of our more experienced vets at Keystone Park can provide, then we'll be returning to Keystone Park immediately. Expect frequent cameos and check-ins from some of your favorite Keystone Park residents. As for now, I believe we need to focus all of our attention on Keystone Wilds. Just because we're starting off in a better position this time than we did before, we're still bound to experience hardships and conflict along the way. Starting a new zoo from nothing is never an easy task, but here, we're always up for a good challenge. If you'd like to further support the construction of Keystone Wilds, consider becoming a member of Club Keystone. The link is in the description. Not only will you receive early access to videos, but you'll also have your name put in Keystone Wilds forever. Thanks to all of our current club members for your endless support. I truly couldn't do this without you. If you enjoyed today's video and the start of our newest adventure on the channel, consider subscribing. It's a great time since it's the beginning of a new series. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment as well. It's especially important today. Since the series is so new, we need animal ideas. If there's an animal you'd like to see in Keystone Wilds, please let me know in the comments below. Welcome to Keystone Wilds, and as you can see, the scenery is a bit different here. Construction has already started, as we already have our ticket booths 100% finished already. Since we saved a bit of time there, let's go over some basic information about our latest project. If you couldn't tell, the zoo is heavily based on Disney's Animal Kingdom, found in Orlando, Florida. This means alongside some of the more quiet and standard exhibits, some more thrilling elements are going to be included also. Plans are already in the works for a complete safari ride, as well as a section themed around dinosaurs. This series is driven by the community that we create, so if you have any suggestions, both large or small, never hesitate to leave a comment. Your creativity is absolutely outstanding. Also, starting now, there's a link to our public Discord server in the description, so feel free to go ahead and join the team. As mentioned before, the ticket stands are already done, so effectively after that we're going to be starting from scratch. All three stands are the exact same, barring a few details, but only the middle one is actually functional. The wall looks highly detailed, but it's actually rather simple. It's a very basic green plaster wall with some aquatic faux rocks of varying colors of gray sprinkled throughout. This design comes directly from the entrance of Animal Kingdom, and I think I captured the palette incredibly well. From above, this is everything that we've accomplished so far. Starting from above, we have the Guest Relations building, which is incomplete, followed then by the actual entrance of the zoo. We then have our 3 ticket booths, followed by the parking lots down below. We have 2, the bus station, as well as the guest parking, which hasn't been started. Finishing up the incomplete Guest Relations building is going to be an excellent starting point. The reason that I started the Guest Relations building off camera is because a lot of the buildings in the entrance of Keystone Wilds are going to look rather similar. For example, the plaster that we used here is the exact same shade of green as the ticket booths. This is perfectly acceptable. The thing is, you have to make your build stand out among the similarities. We're doing that right now by making the back half of the building slightly taller. It's not much, but it does make it stand out. Now we're going to come back over to the already completed ticket booths and steal a little bit of the trim detailing. It was very easy to make. All it is beams from the conservation pack, recolored a bluish gray. We're simply going to take the trim from the ticket booth and place it on the Guest Relations building. One thing to note is always make sure you're placing things on the correct group. You can see what group you're placing it on in the top right. Not only is this a very easy way to stay organized, but it also makes uploading things to the workshop a lot easier, which I'm going to try to be better with in this zoo. The wood trims may seem like an insignificant detail now, but they're actually doing a lot more than you may realize. The gray of the roof and the green of the wall clash really heavily and don't necessarily look good together. However, these beams are doing 2 things. First of all, they're making that clash non-existent now that you can't see the gray of the roof. And secondly, they're adding just a slight amount of depth to where they pop out a little bit more and make the build almost 3D. It appears a lot more dynamic this way. Any amount of depth in your build is going to make it look a lot better right off the bat. We're now going to use the exact same tactic and borrow all of the wall detailing from the ticket booths and bring it over to guest relations. There's two main details at play here. There's rocks from the aquatic pack, and there's also moss decals colored the same shade of green as the wall. Any decal in the game is among the most flat construction piece you can possibly have, so in placing it on the wall, it's very important that you get it as close as possible so it's not sticking out awkwardly. You also want to make sure that details aren't bursting through the wall on the other side. This is very common when placing pieces inside of walls. Always make sure it's not peeking out. Just like the wood trim, these rocks are also adding depth to the bottom of the build. The wall's no longer flat, and it's a lot more interesting to look at now with the rocks in place. These moss decals are also insanely important to the build. They have one simple job: to break up the texture of the plaster. Wherever you notice the build getting a little bit stale and repetitive looking, this is exactly where you want the moss decals to be added in. When going for an extremely realistic build, sometimes the details aren't necessarily the prettiest. For example, right now we need a gutter system. If it starts raining and we don't have one, the roof could be damaged. Since gutters aren't the prettiest aspect of a build, I tried to blend them into the best of my ability. I came up with the idea of blending them into the conservation beams, making them the exact same color as the wood. This way, it just looks like an extension of the beams and adds even more depth to the build we already had. Whenever placing gutters or any sort of water filtration system, just make sure it has a place to go. If it sits up there, it's going to get stagnant, so you have to always add a place for the water to flow down to, typically to the surface. Lastly, since this area isn't special and it's just supposed to blend in with the rest, we're going to be adding some rocks over on this side of the wall as well. The base of the build needs a little bit more color, and I think I have the perfect solution. All we have to do is take some of the conservation wood that we already used, because I really do like the color that we chose, and make trims out of it with the doors. This is very easy to do since the shape is already pre-built for us. All we have to do is line the outside. Luckily, since all of the frames are the exact same dimensions, all we have to do is build one, and then we could copy and paste it over to the other doors. From here we could come over to the front of the build and add a lot of white details to truly make it pop among the darker colors. I always like to make my signs contrast heavily with their backgrounds so guests can easily see what building they're going into. In this case, it's especially important. I wanted to get some more work on the exterior of the building done, so I decided to come in and make some custom planters. These are some of my absolute favorite details because they're really easy to set up and look really nice. All you have to do is make some sort of small wall with any material, and then come in with some mulch and place it all over in the enclosure that you just made. We'll worry about the foliage later. For now, I'll just place some grass temporarily. So far so good, but now we have a really important step to focus on. There's one thing in this image that drives me absolutely insane. Can you guess what it is? If you guessed the pathing system, you'd be absolutely correct. Let's get rid of it. By far the easiest way to accomplish this is by using a different roof piece or a floor piece. They're typically thin enough to where you can place them right over the path and the guest as well as the staff are still going to have access. Since most of these pieces are already on the grid already, you can effectively cover up the entire path very quickly. One thing that you have to remain mindful of though is where the actual path underneath the custom path is, because guests still only will be able to walk where the actual path is. Just because there's a custom path doesn't necessarily mean the guests can walk on it without the proper path underneath. This also pairs very well with custom planters because you can make the path go right underneath them, and since you'll have mulch on the top layer, you'll never even know that the path is there in the first place. It can go right up to it and you'll never see the grass. Without using this technique, it can be really difficult to get precise angles to where everything looks absolutely perfect, but using this technique, you don't necessarily have to be absolutely perfect to get those precise angles. You can still give the path some life and detail by using the exact same trick of the moss that we used on the guest relations building. Simply recolor the moss a very similar color to the actual path itself and place it around. This can act as abrasions in the texture or pretty much anything you want. It really is amazing how one simple trick can transform a build and make it look so much better. Just because it's better without a shadow of a doubt doesn't mean it's even close to being done. I'm thinking now we need to focus on the actual entrance of the zoo. It's one of the most important parts to get right. Keystone Wilds still has a bit of a problem. After you receive your tickets from these expertly designed booths, you actually enter the zoo through absolutely nothing. The entrance to the zoo is one of the most important parts in the entire process, as it's your first true impression of what the zoo has to offer. In Planet Zoo specifically, your entrance is defined by these buildings from the Facilities tab. This is where guests are going to enter and exit the zoo, and nowhere else. I started off by using our classic gray and blue conservation post, but merging 4 of them together to try and make a bigger post. This is going to make the entrance look a lot more formidable. I then took our new creation and placed it on either side of the actual entrance. I then took these 2 posts and copy and pasted them over every single entrance. I then used the exact same post with a slight overhang to create that depth effect to connect up everything we've built so far. With the build set up the way it is, I knew I had to use a triangular roof design, so I ended up going with a very basic vertical wooden plank roof, colored the exact same shade of bluish gray. Naturally, with this big bulky roof on, we needed some more supports. For the supports, we used the exact same planks that we'd been using, but lined them up very carefully if the supports already existed. To make the build look better and even more detailed, we came in with the same supports but on a smaller variant, and placed them in between the larger ones. With that, the structure of the entrance was complete. Afterwards, I added in some light bulbs and some ropes for detailing, and even some flags on the top. But overall, making an entrance that's highly detailed really isn't that difficult of a task, and every zoo should have one in my opinion. Overall though, the entrance pavilion is starting to really take its shape, but once you actually get through the entrance, guests are going to want something specific, especially in the mornings. We should probably fix that issue right now. To the right of the entrance, I think we have just enough space to construct a very small coffee shop that guests are really going to appreciate upon entry to Keystone Wilds early in the mornings. Construction should be rather easy, as it's pretty much going to be a culmination of the 3 buildings that we've already made, totally summarized. For the actual functional shops, I ended up deciding to use a Street Fox Coffee, as well as a Bernie Bakes. I always like to use the buildings that are already preset in the game instead of creating my own. It helps out with immersion and makes every zoo feel really connected. Starting off, I used the same shade of green we've been using for the entirety of the entrance, all over the place to make a convincing facade that's big enough to where there realistically could be a kitchen in here. I then placed on the roof and used the exact same technique with the trim and gutters that we used in the guest relations building. I want everything in the entrance to look very uniform and similar. To avoid the sun from beating down on guests waiting in line at 9 in the morning, I decided to recolor some of these Indian fabric pieces to something a bit more muted that would fit in perfectly with the build. Naturally, one detail leads to a lot more, so I used some of the supports we used on the entrance building as very simple supports holding up the fabric here. Adding in the rockwork was the exact same as we did for the guest relations building. Matter of fact, we borrowed the exact pattern from the guest relations building. One detail that is new is adding these surface damage decals. If you don't know, plaster typically is something that's very thin that goes over a main structure of a build, which means realistically it's not going to stay in perfect condition, so it's very realistic to have some damage underneath things that stick out from the build, especially windows and street signs. Overall, a really simple yet effective build. I have a feeling we're going to be expanding on it in the next video, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Also, check out the standard staff uniform for Keystone Wilds. It contrasts very nicely with the blue from Keystone Park. The scale of the coffee shop fits in perfectly with the rest of the entrance pavilion, but now I'm thinking we need to make something a bit more hidden for the staff. Keeping a happy staff is of utmost importance. To the left of guest relations, I want to make a decently sized staff area, and since it's right at the start of the zoo, it's likely going to be one of the biggest ones in all of Keystone Wilds. The problem is the guests don't necessarily like to see the staff area, so we're going to have to construct a pretty big wall of foliage to block their views. Whenever placing foliage or rocks in a natural formation, I always recommend turning on random rotation. What this will do is rotate your materials randomly in any direction. It really helps make that natural look because even you can't predict where it's going to go. After random rotation is on, I always recommend starting with a decent layer of buffalo grass whenever starting foliage. Think of buffalo grass as almost a requirement to be able to place the rest of the plant life. Another personal favorite of mine are the common saltwort plants. When sunken into the ground and placed with the buffalo grass, they look like a different species of grass that's slightly taller. You can further push this strategy to its limits by using the creosote bush. It's simply one of the most versatile plants in the game. Once your initial layer of grasses and things that are acting as grasses are finally in place, it's time to add some big things, mainly rocks and trees. This is when placing the foliage gets significantly easier because it's a lot easier to focus on detailing one simple area as opposed to the entire mulch patch as a whole. One pitfall that a lot of builders will fall into is overdoing it with flowers, and as sad as it is to say, realistically speaking, the less flowers the more realistic the build is going to be. They're not absolutely everywhere like you may think. They're perfect as an accent or a detail though. Place the flowers where things get a little bit dull with the greens and the grays. While the foliage does look good, and we certainly succeeded in that aspect, we absolutely failed with letting guests see through the foliage. I think we're going to have to do a little bit better with that, but for now I think we should start on the opposite side and start working on that staff area. It may just be easier to hide once we know specifically what we're hiding. No zoo is complete without a staff area, and for the last build in today's episode, I'm thinking we need to start with a keeper hut as well as an animal trade center to truly kick off the zoo in the next episode. We're going to be using the exact same path trick we used before of the entrance plaza, but since we're in a staff-only area, we don't necessarily have to make it look nice. This is precisely why we tried to hide it from the public's eye. If you're unfamiliar, this is a keeper hut, and it's the biggest of the two variants you can possibly have. They're incredibly important when running the zoo, as this is where the keepers are going to go to prepare food for your various animals. By using the custom path trick, we were able to get the concrete to go right up to the building, but remember, whenever using the custom paths, you have to ensure that the regular paths actually go to where you're placing them. Right next to the keeper hut, I decided to place arguably the most important building in the entire game, the Animal Trade Center. Without this, you can't buy or sell any animals. Right behind the Trade Center and the keeper hut, I decided to place a solar panel, not necessarily because we needed it, but because I figured if the guests were to peek through, they'd appreciate seeing a solar panel right at the start of the zoo. By toggling on your heat maps at the top of the screen, you can clearly see which buildings have a negative impact on guests, and if they do have a negative impact on guests, it's imperative that you hide them from their view. That's exactly what we're doing now. Once we get the green shell of the building on, it'll be a lot tougher to see. Staff buildings themselves also get a scenery rating bonus. That basically means if you look out the window and there's nice scenery, the staff are going to be well rested and work harder. The problem now lies with our staff area itself, as the buildings are pretty much just insulation and wood. This isn't going to work. Now, a staff area doesn't have to look as presentable as a guest area, however you still want it to be highly detailed. The more broken in and almost dirty a staff area looks, the more realistic it is because these areas are used constantly. Basically, a staff area is meant for function and purpose. It helps run the entire zoo, whereas a guest area is meant to look really nice so the guests are appealed. Just because the build is prioritizing functionality over looks doesn't mean we can't make it as detailed as the rest, it's just a different type of detailing. As you can hopefully see, we utilized a lot of the same details as we did for both the guest relations building, the ticket booths, as well as the coffee shop. We just made it in a slightly different style. Once the basic shell of the build is done, you can effectively throw anything at it to see what sticks. We can add some lights, a few windows at the top that would provide good natural lighting. I even tried my luck at making some circuitry backed by the solar panel. Polishing up and detailing builds is absolutely my favorite aspect of the process, as this is where you can truly let loose your creativity and tell a story with the builds. We'll certainly delve more into how to do that in the next episode when the first resident of Keystone Wilds finds his way home. And yes, I did say he on purpose, because the first resident of Keystone Wilds we've already met before at Keystone Park. If you have any guesses, be sure to leave them in the comments below. I'm curious to see how many people get it right. Overall, certainly a successful first episode. I'm really happy with the progress that we made. Keystone Wilds is certainly off to a running start, and by the next episode when we bring in the first animal, we're going to be sprinting. I hope you guys are as excited to watch this series as I am to record it. June has been a bit of a slow month, and I truly do apologize for that, but we're officially back on the grind now. Keystone Park absolutely has a bright future, and I'd be so happy if you take this journey with us. With all that being said, I have a lot of work to do behind the scenes to get this series off the ground. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Huge shout out to our Club Keystone members once again, you guys truly are the best, and especially thanks to Sparrow for designing the logos not only for Keystone Park, but also for Keystone Wilds too. I'll catch you guys next week for the second episode of Keystone Wilds. See you then, Kingpin out.